Shudder Sundays, episode 37. I think I messed up one of the numbers in the last couple weeks. I rearranged some names on the YouTube videos.
That's okay. Could be worse.
But I think we're at 37. This week we are going into the 1983 thriller horror Stephen King adaptation, Cujo.
Cujo.
Can he get us in here? Can he eat his way in here? Can he?
Now, Cujo was released August 12th, 1983, and this was directed by Louis Teague, who did Cat's Eye and The Jewel of the Nile. This was filmed, we usually don't do like cinematographers, but this is a pretty notable person. This was filmed by Jan de Bont, who's done a bunch of things, but in particular the movies that I like, Speed, Minority Report, Twisters. Die Hard was another big one of his. So he's a pretty big name in the film industry. So figured I'd make note of that one. But this was starring Dee Wallace as Donna Trenton, who really went on a run in the early 80s. She was in The Howling at 81, E.T. at 82, Cujo 83, and then Critters 86. So she had like a very big run in that early to mid 80s right there. Starring alongside her was Daniel Kelly as Vic Trenton. Biggest role I saw was Star Trek Insurrection.
Yeah, I originally thought this was the dad from the Brady Bunch. Turns out it's not.
Wayne Brady. And starring Danny Pintaro as Tad Trenton, or Tadpole. Who was in Who's the Boss. But why don't you give us a little rundown of Cujo before we dive in?
A mother and her young son are trapped in their car as a rabid St. Bernard stalks their every move from the outside. Short little intro, but that pretty much gives you the whole gist of the movie.
That's the gist of the movie right there. So Shudder skull rating. We did just watch this, so I'm sure you remember what the skull rating was. So why don't you give it to the people?
The Shudder skull rating for Cujo was 5 out of 5 skulls.
It was. Classic. Rotten Tomatoes. They think a little bit differently.
I actually didn't look at the Rotten Tomatoes this time around.
So what do you think the critic score of Rotten Tomatoes is for Cujo?
I'm going to say somewhere in the high 60s. 67, 68?
60 on the dot.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then the audience score. What do you think the audience gave Cujo?
I think the audience liked this.
Maybe. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't.
79?
46% for Cujo from the Rotten Tomato community. They don't always get it right.
That's crazy. This is my first watch of Cujo, actually, shockingly, and I figured I've just heard so much about it that I thought it was
classic.
Yeah.
It is a classic. A couple little things before we get into our topics. A couple little notes that I found interesting. The dogs in this would often have to have their tails tied down to their legs because they were having too much fun and just wagging their tails around everywhere. So they wanted it obviously to look like a menacing St. Bernard, and well, when they're clearly playing and wagging their big old tails around, you know, you can tell the difference. And fun fact, I grew up having 2 St. Bernards. Had Xena and Liza.
Cute.
Yep.
Fun. I did not have St. Bernards. I did have a Doberman growing up, though, another big dog.
They did miss this tactic a couple times of tying their tails down because I did make note of it. I did see, I was like, oh, and this dog's having fun.
It's funny.
He's murdering somebody's tails, is wagging.
It was literally after you just told me you would look that up, too, and there was a scene where, I think it was when he was knocking down Joe, the mechanic guy or whatever, but I noticed his tail was like tucked down.
I think during the first kill, when he was, I forget the guy's name, but
it was either Joe or that other
his friend,
annoying guy, Gary or something, or
To make the St. Bernards attack the car, animal trainers put the dog's favorite toys inside the car. So that's why they were jumping at attacking towards the car.
I was going to say, they actually smashed into these cars.
Well, no, they didn't smash
I was going to say, it was like he full-on headbutted it.
No, those were...
Okay.
There's a couple instances. So there were, I believe, 5 St. Bernards used during this process. There was a big mechanical St. Bernard head that was used.
Okay.
And they also had a man in a dog costume
for
some scenes.
Kind of weird.
Reminds me of like Weasel from Suicide Squad. It was pretty... Man. During one of the scenes, Danny, he was actually he actually bit Dee Wallace's finger during the seizure scene.
Oh, Tadpole?
Yeah, Tadpole. So during the seizure scene, he actually bit her finger. So her reaction in that scene was real. And that's really it for little tidbits and trivia that I saw of this movie. A couple notes throughout the movie that I took. What a great line. Broads, booze, and baseball. That's just the way of life right there from our characters. They pouring the dog food into
The big, like, trough.
the trough, thinking that the Saint Bernard's like, you can't feed dogs like cats.
He's like, here we go. Just leave this out for him. It'll be good.
They don't pace themselves.
No.
Another fun dog story. 2 other dogs I had, Dawson and Tyson. We had their food in like a cupboard area. I got home from work one day and the bag was on the ground, completely ripped open, food kind of everywhere. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, where are these dogs? And I go and I look around and there they are, lying on the couch. I thought they were going to pop. They ate. I'm thankfully nothing wrong happened. I didn't have to get them rushed anywhere. But dogs will eat themselves sick. They don't know when to stop. They're not like cats where they'll like graze and have a little bit.
Right.
For the most part. Maybe there are some out there that kind of graze throughout the day, but I've always been, you feed them at one point in the day and another at night or whatever. But I wish I had pictures of these. The one dog I had was fat to begin with, Tyson, but it looked like if you poked him with a pin, he would explode. He was so fat from eating all of the food. So that I when I saw that, I was like, yeah, you can't just give them the whole bag. They'll eat the whole bag.
Yeah.
Man, I hated Tad.
Tad.
It's so annoying. Actually, I hate everybody in this movie.
I hate it. I was just
Spoiler
going to say,
alert.
just about every character in this movie is pretty insufferable, but it's so funny that I thought his name was Thad at first, but they had finally said, like, Tad in my head when I was watching this on the porch earlier for a little bit before I came inside. I was like, Tad, is that short for tadpole?
And then they
Dad
called
called him tadpole. I was like, oh my God.
Stupid. The scene where I believe was it Steve or
Steve is the
mistress
the
of
mistress of the
the
yeah.
mister of the mistress when he like ransacked and destroyed their house. Like, how many fucking feathers do they have in their pillows there?
How many pillows do
Every room
they
was
have?
just covered in fucking
And
feathers.
what, you had to go destroy their house because you were mad that the married woman broke off your affair?
I can see the angry part, but the fact that there was like just coated in
Over the
feathers,
top, yeah.
it was ridiculous. And then the breaking the car window scene at the end.
First of all, this kid was already passing out, dying in the car, and she was up in the front seat, and he was sprawled out in the back and right in the middle of the heat of the sun. Cujo had already almost busted out the window from the passenger side car door, which she was able to
busted both
open.
windows.
I was going to say, which she was able to open very easily from the inside, so I know if she was just able to bust that window open from the outside, she could have opened the door, got him out real quick, but no, she said, oh, not my baby, and she busted out the back window
Pistol
and
whipped it.
had glass all over the top of him.
So in the scene, Donna is out of the car and she's trying to get back into it, and Tad is still in the car, and the door handles are off. She can't get into the car, and instead of beating in some of the other windows that have already shattered, she decides to take the pistol while they're on a farm, so she could have found like another tool to use. Instead, she uses the butt of a loaded pistol.
I'm surprised she didn't shoot the window out, honestly.
Well, I thought she was going to shoot herself, like by hitting the gun. Yeah. But she takes the pistol and busts in the rear view mirror, which
like the trunk mirror.
The trunk mirror while Tad is laying under the glass.
Passed out.
Pretty bad critical thinking, I'd say, at that point. And then the classic 80s freeze frame ending. You didn't even think that was the ending? You don't watch a lot of the cheesy
ending
80 movies.
Was probably the craziest ending I've ever seen in my life, and it was so bleak that I, like Nick said, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my, I literally laughed out loud. I said, oh my God, this is the end?
Oh, yeah.
Literally.
Welcome to cheesy 80s endings.
Walking out of the house with
Freeze
the kid in his wrap, and stopped, and the credits rolled. It was like, no way.
Oh, yeah. So let's get into our topics a little bit. The good. What did you have for the good of Cujo?
Well, honestly, I personally am a big fan of, like, 80s cheesy horror movies anyways. I wouldn't per se this is a full-on horror movie, because like you said, kind of a horror thriller, kind of a...
I'd say horror. It's almost like a creature film, but it's a realistic one.
I didn't want to say it was kind of a creature feature, but it is more of a realistic one. That's a good way to put it. I did like the concept of it. The Saint Bernard Cujo gets bit by a bat on the nose and goes rabid and starts killing people. It's fun, you know? I think the reason I didn't watch Cujo originally is because I thought well, Cujo ultimately does die, but I thought it was going to be
turns
a
into
lot.
a bad dog.
Yeah.
Bad dog.
I was at the beginning when he's like chasing the bunny around. I'm like, oh great, I'm already going to hate this movie. He's going to go beat up this bunny and kill him in his own home, which didn't happen, which was good. So I did like the storyline. I thought it was interesting. Even though the characters were pretty insufferable, all the acting was pretty great. Dee Wallace was good.
She always is.
Tadpole, even though he was a
Really good.
snot-nosed little kid, I was even telling Nick the scene of them in the car where they first come in contact with Cujo, the amount of like screaming, I was like, this kid either is a great child actor or was absolutely terrified in this
Probably
scene, because yeah. What did you have for some of the good?
I put it's a very simple story.
Yes.
I kind of enjoy those. It's just an easy watch.
Yes.
Yep. It is a classic. Just the way it's shot, like we talked about, Jan de Bont, it's just shot very well. And it's almost shot, it's not shot like a horror movie. It doesn't feel that much like a horror movie, but it is.
I feel like that's why maybe I got that vibe from it.
It's sort of like Jaws almost, where it's like, it's shot so well, it's not inherently scary, it's not crazy gory, it's not in your face, but it's still under the horror umbrella.
Which is funny because there's a little Jaws Easter egg in this movie too, because I was trying to think, I was like, when the hell did Jaws release? 75?
Yeah, 75.
And then when they're at the dinner table, and Tad kind of, the mom and dad are arguing, and he goes under the table and he's like, dun-dun, dun-dun, with his little hand coming up.
Yeah.
I was like, that's fun.
Well, also because, I mean, Jaws takes place essentially in Martha's Vineyard or whatever, but Stephen King likes to have all his stuff take place in Maine.
Yes.
So it's sort of in the New England region still. I didn't think the dog scenes were really cheesy. I think it could have I think it could have gone bad very easily.
You did or you didn't think they were cheesy?
I don't think they were that cheesy.
No, I don't.
Yeah,
No, I didn't.
And that's
either.
a good. I think it could have gone bad very easily. I think it could have looked very
Corny.
bad. Like you could have been using mostly just a man in a dog costume
Or a big, like, fake stuffed dog flying around. Or
exactly.
something. Yeah,
I've seen that a bunch of times in other
it looked great.
cheeky films, but it came out fine. The acting was really good, like you mentioned, and then I do like the realism aspect of it.
I do too.
It's not really like this like undead dog. It's
No.
not a zombie thing. It's very like I guess you could see it happening. You know, it's
dog
just a
that's
rabid
rabid.
dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the bad. What did you have for the bad of Cujo?
The ending, for one, just left off on so much, and I feel like this movie had so many bits and pieces that didn't need to be in it that you could have added other stuff that would have made more sense to the storyline. Like Donna having an affair with the quote-unquote local town stud had absolutely nothing to do with this. And the fact that the only other part that he had was just destroying their house, and then there was like, oh,
And bringing over a new table.
Yeah, and
twice.
bring over the new table twice, exactly.
And a little horse.
Everyone in this movie was stupid. The cops acted like they had no clue what they were doing. They pulled up after finding out that her car's like abandoned at the Joe Camber's mechanic shop in the middle of nowhere at his house. And the cop pulls up and sees the car with all the blood marks and all this crazy stuff on it. He's like, you know what?
Let me
go check the barn first
heard
and
a
not
sound
look
in
at
the
the
barn.
car. Yeah. So I know it's a movie, obviously, but sometimes I'm not very nitpicky about these, but there were certain things that I was like, oh my God, like, you knew this was a bad idea. It just didn't make sense on that end. Other than that, let me think on it for a second. What did you have from the bad?
I put the characters.
Yeah.
Like, who am I, in this movie, who am I even supposed to root for? Mm-hmm. I hate everybody.
Yeah.
Like, Donna's cheating on her husband, who seems like a pretty decent
Seems like a
dude.
pretty cool guy, yeah.
He works for cereal ads.
Something, yeah.
Pretty cool, but he's like, he's doing his best for his family. The kid is just terrible, just whining and crying and screaming the whole time. I was just like almost rooting for him to die, which he does in the book. The
Really?
kid dies in the book.
Also going to mention too that I'm not a very avid reader, so I've never read Cujo.
Yeah, so I was really hoping this kid was going to die because I couldn't take it anymore. He was driving me insane.
I was telling Nick when we were watching this too that I feel like the kid who plays Samuel in the Babadook had to have gotten some inspiration, watched Cujo possibly before this, because they acted exactly the same, screaming and acting crazy and
Insane.
annoying.
Like, I'm rooting for Cujo.
Yeah.
Like, I'm rooting for the bad guy, which...
It wasn't his fault he got bit by the bat.
Yeah, I wanted him to turn it around. I wanted the bad boy to be a good dog again. Good boy.
Did we also... I did have one more good before we go back on the bad. I'm sorry, I know we're still talking on it. But,
We're already in the bad.
I know we're already in the bad. You know what I meant before I go back to it. the way they had Cujo looking, like all dirty and gross and grimy and bloody,
he was,
and
covered
like
in
the
egg yolk.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I was wondering what they used to make like the gook coming from his eyes and like around his face and
Probably
stuff like
egg or
that.
something.
Yeah,
But it's fine for dogs.
Yeah,
It's actually
but-
good for their coat.
I guess if that's technically the costuming department or special effects and
Special
stuff
effects
like that.
makeup.
Everything, even like when Dee Wallace gets bit and stuff like that, and all the other people getting murdered, even though there's only a few that were shown on screen, look pretty good.
Only 2 on screen.
Yeah, yep.
I think. Yep. Back to the bad. I think it was too slow in the first half. It was pretty much like you said, a marriage drama, small town history for the first half, and then
That's what
the
I was
second
trying to get to.
There's a distinct line in this movie where
Mm-hmm.
the first half is just kind of this slow build up of storylines that we don't really necessarily follow
Mm-hmm.
up on, especially with the ending being what it is. And then the middle is just them stuck in the car for the whole movie for like that 40-minute mark. So it's like, it just took it was too slow getting there. They should have stretched the whole Cujo going crazy a little bit more.
Yes, because it kind of seemed like you were watching two different movies at one point, because I feel like the brief moment that they had with Cujo when they took the first car there to get worked on at the mechanic shop, he was only shown for a little bit. They didn't really go into too much detail, and I feel like you said, the first pretty much half of the movie was just focused on her having the affair and like the family life and stuff like that. So yeah, I would have rather, and especially this being my first watch too, it wasn't really what I was expecting.
No, I think they could have just done away with some of the storylines and brought in the Cujo stuff a little bit earlier maybe and spread it out.
Yeah.
And it goes into my other point where like being in the car for that long was just unrealistic and boring for me.
It was a little boring.
Like you could have, I would have found a way to get out. St. Bernards aren't that fast. I know they're rabid, but it's not that fast. It's a big dog.
Would have tried to make a run for it
Could
at
have
that point.
gotten. You could have got out and run it into the barn, and locked the barn in there.
barn,
You could
a
have run
house.
into the house. You could have. You
The
could have
shed,
done
there was
something.
so many
like,
things out there,
before
yeah.
just like waiting in the scalding hot car while your kid's lips get all chapped up.
And she had noticed it in her peripherals too, which is what I would have done to begin with. There was a bat, like a baseball bat, like right next to the car. Even if she didn't want to make the run for it then, I would have ran out real quick, grabbed the bat, go back in the car, and then you're at least ready when you gotta go back
And you're
out.
at
You
a
know?
farm.
Yeah.
There's gonna be pitchforks and axes and.
That's exactly what I was thinking
machinery,
this whole
anything.
time too. I was like, she's
There's
literally
something.
at a farm. How is there nothing lying around
Yeah.
that she could use to like defend herself against this dog?
And there is. She just didn't. We didn't do it.
No, we didn't
So
get to see it.
That's all I had for the bad.
Yeah.
Anything else for you before we move on? No. All right. So top moment. What was the top moment of Cujo? The freeze frame ending.
The freeze frame ending is pretty up there, but also when Cujo literally was ramming himself into the car, headbutting the car.
That's what I had when he was busting into the car because the phone was pissing him off.
And then he hates the phone,
noises.
hates noises, and then not only did he literally bust into the car multiple times, and then it's just so funny, these St. Bernards, what they had to probably train him to do, and then he ripped off all the door handles with his mouth. I was like, what a little
Throw some
shit.
peanut butter on there or something. That'd be good. But that was my top moment as well when Cujo really showed like full on Cujo mode.
Yeah.
So what would you change about Cujo?
I would have more of Cujo and less of the family drama aspects.
Less of Dee Wallace being a little slut.
Dee Wallace being a slut, yeah.
Which is funny too. Steve. That at the time was her actual husband.
Really?
In real life, they were actually married.
That's so funny.
So
I love stuff like that.
technically, no adultery.
No adultery.
It's fine. They were married. I would change kind of along the lines that you said. I would just change the start.
And definitely the ending too. My God.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, but
just a little. It is fun.
you do
just
need
a little something.
like resolution to all the storylines you introduced.
I feel like
So are they back together? Is it happy ever ending? Like,
that's what I'm saying.
are they going to arrest the dog?
It had me asking more questions.
Where's the farmer's family?
That's what I was
No
wondering.
follow up on the wife and the kid.
So his friend died, the mechanic died, the family's out for like a week. So it's like, what? No, they're just all gonna come back. The husband's dead, all the dog's dead,
Dog's
like all
dead,
this
husband's
crazy
dead,
shit
friend's
happened.
dead.
Their house is broken into, windows are bashed in. Like
Business as usual at the old
I get the Camber farm.
Camber farm. So I would just change the start. It's just a little too slow.
Yeah.
Don't introduce all these other random storylines if you're not going to continue them, if they don't mean much to you. So that's all I really had.
They could have at least, too, like, had to make it all the way down the stairs before they cut the scene with the credit roll. It was, like, mid-step. I was like, could have been at least had him get back to the car. The Jaguar.
It's like Rocky. They always ended those on, like, freeze frames.
They should have peeled out in the Jaguar to leave.
I was waiting for him to peel out and, like, kick dirt up into his little kid's face when he was leaving the family.
Tadpole's face.
So who is this for? Who would you recommend watch Cujo?
I feel like this is for anyone who is a fan of classic 80s horror films with a little bit. I thought it was kind of funny in some parts. It's a very...
It's hard to take this movie serious.
Yes, I think that's a good word. And if you're a fan of Stephen King and his adaptations, and if you're familiar with his books, and if you've read this book, I think it'd be very fun to compare the two together.
Yeah, I say classic horror fans as well. So, fear and beer rating, a fear scale 1 through 5 of how scary this film was, and a beer rating of 1 through 5. How much did you enjoy this film? What is your fear rating for Cujo?
Fear rating, I gave this a 1.5.
I matched you at 1.5.
Did you?
Yep.
And my reasoning was because it's a very low rating. This is not a very scary movie, but if you think about it, if you're looking at this from maybe like a kid's perspective watching this, like some kids are like, and some adults too, are really afraid of dogs, like deathly afraid of dogs, and this is probably their worst nightmare. So this could definitely be scary for someone, but just personally wasn't scary for me.
Yeah. Same thing. It was the makeup looked really good. I thought that was fun. So your beer rating of 1 through 5, how much did you enjoy Cujo? What'd you go with?
I gave this a 3.5.
Okay. I'm not far behind you. I gave it a 3.
Yeah.
So, fun film, a classic, like we said. Got to give it a watch. But that's all we got for Cujo. We will be back next week where we are going to talk Prom Night. Another classic.
The OG?
Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis.
I think it's my first time watch for that one too, buddies.
All right, well, we'll see you then.